They're telling us what we all need to hear. We are entering a climate security century formed by massive destabilization, and there's going to be follow-on impacts. We need to start preparing accordingly.
The U.S. government just released a series of reports with a stark warning. Climate change threatens global security.
The top line is that all these different agencies view climate change as a threat to the United States.
There were 3 separate reports, one from the Pentagon, one from the Department of Homeland Security, and for the first time ever, the National Intelligence Estimate, a report from all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies and federal scientists.
These intelligence professionals are not known to overstate the threats facing the country or abroad.
The U.S. and other leading superpowers are on track to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels in 2030 than outlined in international agreements. That means we won't meet a 1.5-degree reduction as promised in the Paris Accords. And these intelligence officials are warning not doing so means mass migration, financial uncertainty, increased war, all leading to a destabilized world. Mark explains how.
There's going to be increased geopolitical divides, and that's happening really in 3 ways. One is between developed nations, which have really disproportionately emitted greenhouse gas emissions. That includes the United States, Canada, much of Europe, and developing nations who lack the resources to adapt to climate change and tragically have not produced the same number of emissions. I call this the climate blame game, as people start looking at who should have their fair share of emissions reduced. There's also between petrostates, that includes Russia, as their economies are heavily reliant upon oil and fossil fuels, and non-petrostates. So those petrostates will be really struggling to diversify their economies. And then there's frankly a really important issue between, I think, the United States and China. China is now the world's leading greenhouse gas emitter. It's how is this going to relate to US and China relations, particularly as a lot of concerns over the South China Sea, Taiwanese status, and trade policy. And so climate change is sort of serving as a wedge between these different states.
We asked the UN Secretary General about that risk.
How concerned are you, and how concerned should future generations be for the potential of increased conflict and being saddled with a future war or global war that is essentially predictable?
It is obvious that climate change is an accelerator of the factors of conflict. So we cannot say that all conflicts in the world are due to climate change, but it is true that climate change is a multiplier of many other negative things that happen in the world.
The military is going to be called upon to respond to what's called defense support to civil authorities, humanitarian assistance missions at home. So that's going to really stress the National Guard, which has certain expertise and authorities, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard. Of course, internationally, as fights over natural resources, certain states are really going to struggle with climate migration and sea level rise. I think the United States, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, that's by India and the Pacific Command part of the world, are really going to see an increase in uptick in missions related to humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. The U.S. military is the largest military in the world. It's a blue water Navy. They have the most capacity to assist in disaster relief. And that's been increasingly a part of the military's function.
The Defense Department isn't just facing issues from climate change abroad, but right here at home. Military defense installations and bases along the coast impacted by hurricanes Michael and Florence, and severe weather like fires in 2017 burned hundreds of acres near an Air Force base in Southern California.
Americans should care, for one, because it's not just an international issue as a theoretical issue. Military installations are going to be increasingly at risk to sea level rise, extreme weather. The seas are rising, the soil is sinking. And so just from a military infrastructure as a taxpayer, you should want your military installations to be safe so they can do the tough jobs they need to do abroad. And so the thinking being, if as a taxpayer, you want a good return on investment for your national security infrastructure. And so climate change is going to force us to ask hard questions about where we should spend that money.
Extreme natural disasters also impact the Department of Homeland Security, who also issued their own report. In their report, they say they'll be incorporating climate change into their guidance. FEMA is a big part of DHS, And according to their report, since 1980, there have been $298 billion natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, droughts, and wildfires in the US. And those cost about $1.97 trillion in damages. That number is increasing every year. Between 1980 and 2020, there were an average of 7 events per year. But a quarter of all of those events happened within just the last 5 years.
The Department of Homeland Security suggests that there is going to be increased pressure on Homeland Security resources, particularly the Coast Guard, which is part of the Homeland Security as it responds to natural disasters, as well as migration at the southern border. The intelligence report highlighted 11 nations which are going to really struggle with climate impacts. 4 of them are very much in the news: Honduras, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Guatemala, because of struggles over food security, climate change, increasing drought, increasing just agriculture and farming there. And the thinking being is that this could lead to even more migration that will reach the southern border.
A 4th report, also by the White House, estimates mass migration due to climate change. They found nearly 3% of the population, that's 143 million people, will transfer regions in 3 areas: Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America, moving within country by 2050. All of these warnings as a separate 5th report came out from the Treasury Department, cautioning the financial sector may experience credit and market risks associated with loss of income, defaults, and changes in the value of assets, disproportionately impacting low-income communities and people of color. This flurry of documents released just days before the president is scheduled to head to the 2021 UN Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland.
The science is quite clear about humans' role in causing climate change.